Hello, everybody. Mabuhay.
Hello, everyone. Mabuhay.
Nice to see you today on this bright sunny morning. We thought we'd come outside for today's show.
And with Madrid just finishing, it feels like we're sat in Madrid, but we're not. We're sat in sunny Keynsham.
Yes, sunny Kensington. Madrid is, well, for the women, is finished now. We watched the final yesterday. Live watch along if you want to go back and check out the archive. And Rome starting tomorrow. Well, Rome starting midweek this week. In fact, why don't we ask Dan when Rome's starting?
The draw for Rome is tomorrow morning, May the 4th, bank holiday here. And by mid-morning, we'll know how the draw is looking. But we're going to be discussing all things Rome in due course because it's quite an interesting point in the season. And we're going to review Madrid and discuss the fact that the season has taken a twist because we thought it was going to be very much 2026. Aryna Sabalenka dominating the season with her new approach, a very efficient approach, picking and choosing when she played, having lots of rest in between and reaching every final. Madrid has thrown a spanner in the works, so we're going to review Madrid.
Well, I think it was a good spanner, though, don't you?
Exactly, yes. And it's thrown up some interesting scenarios for the rankings. So we will look at the rankings in a little bit more detail and consider the potential of the battle for the world number one position really becoming much more of a focus when only about 4 weeks ago, it looked like Aryna Sabalenka, having done the double in the Sunshine Swing in America at the end of March, winning in Indian Wells and Miami, was going to waltz through the season way ahead in the rankings. But things are starting to change on that front.
But also hotting up for me, I felt like, as your numpty tennis watcher, I felt like with the men's, I think it's been 2 years since any final has not had one of either Sinner or Alcaraz in it if they attended the event. This makes for me, like, can I call it predictable? Tennis. Whereas the WTA Madrid this week finished with number 8 and number 23 competing against each other in the final. Now that is really interesting tennis. And we've been saying this for a while now, but I'm not sure, Dan will tell me, I'm not sure whether there's been one that's quite such a great example of that.
Well, in terms of an event where all the top players have attended, it's quite rare that you have a final between players ranked even just outside the top 10, top 20. So Marta Kostyuk, being the player who entered the week in the low 20s, has risen as a result of her amazing win. But yes, it is quite unusual, but not as unusual as it would be in the men. It's not totally predictable. And really, that I think is all power to the women.
Well, it absolutely is. Absolutely is. I'm sure that the WTA are thrilled to bits that this has happened. I'm sure they don't mean harm or bad towards any of the top players. It's great for the sport.
It is. And we're going to, our sort of deep analysis this episode is all going to be focused on what kind of gets people over the line. Why is it that some of these more outside names are able to push through and get through the quarterfinal stage, the semi-final stage, and even like Marta Kostyuk has done yesterday, win these big titles when all the top players are present? What is it that helps them get over the line? And why do a lot of other players just fall short? And we're going to discuss that in a little bit more detail this week, as well as review everything that's happened on the court.
And I'm thrilled that it's not all about brackets and physicality. There's a lot of mentality in there, isn't there?
Yes, and the little section, what I'm going to call it's about the Clinchers Disease. Is that something that really affects you, or whether you can bypass that and you're actually...
Disease?
Well, yes, it stops you clinching. Victory. You not like that?
I don't think that's a great little phrase, no. We'll have to come up with another one for next week. But for now, the Clinchers Disease.
Well,
Write in your comments. Tell us what you're going to call it.
Where you clinch defeat from victory. And snooker followers will see that clearly displayed last night as Mark Allen missed the easiest black to take his place in the final. And he literally snatched defeat from the
Doors
of
of
victory.
victory. So the Clinchers Disease.
Yeah, and I think it's a big thing in tennis because it comes down to those moments, 1 point, and it seems pertinent because Aryna Sabalenka lost in Madrid, and she was in the quarterfinal, and she had 6 match points to make the semi-final, and yet even her, the world number 1, suffered from the Clinchers disease.
So just in case Mary and our other listener watched the game and didn't know who Sabalenka was playing when she lost in that way, could you remind us, please?
Yes, well, I'm gonna save it for our review, which is following next.
Oh, I thought this was our review. Okay, review. Fast forward. Play.
Okay, so Madrid has taken place over the last sort of 10 to 12 days, and we've gone from 96 players all the way down to the final two, which the final took place last night. We did a live watch along, and it was Russia versus Ukraine, Mira Andreeva versus Marta Kostyuk. And Marta Kostyuk, as Katie successfully predicted live on our watch along,
Confidently.
came through in straight sets and won the match, and her first big title, winning a WTA 1000 event. So second only to the 4 Grand Slam events. This is one of 10 WTA 1000 events, and she celebrated with a backflip on court.
We've never seen that before, have we? I wonder if that was a first, like when Becca ran up into the crowd to the player box at Wimbledon after the final. I wonder if that was a first, and we're going to see lots of gymnastic shenanigans at the end of every match now.
Well, apparently she spent 7 years doing acrobatics as a child and had celebrated like that quite a few times when she was winning big junior titles. So there were quite a few backflips from her junior days on social media this morning.
Well, good for her. And I don't suppose many, maybe we'll see soon, I don't suppose many of her fellow competitors can do that. So that's a nice little signature.
Yes, but an interesting tournament in terms of the top 2 players in the world. We felt coming into Madrid that Elena Rybakina and Aryna Sabalenka were both separating themselves from the rest of the tour. Sabalenka had reached every final, every event she'd chosen to play this season so far. Elena Rybakina was also gaining that consistency, going deep into events. She'd come off a win in Stuttgart. So it felt like those two coming into Madrid were separating themselves. And there was tiny, tiny little bit of talk of is this going the same way as Alcaraz and Sinner? But as we now know, little faith in the rest of the tour because the women have stood up and demonstrated how the strength in depth is as good as ever. And really, no surprise, Rybakina lost early. She lost in the round of 16. She lost to Anastasia Potapova, who I know Katie's going to talk a little bit about because Potapova played a good week in Madrid, got to the semi-finals, having beaten Rybakina. And not a surprise, Rybakina played a lot more tennis than Sabalenka, so it was kind of a not if, but when Rybakina lost a bit earlier than you would expect because you just can't keep playing week after week. So having won in Stuttgart, it's no surprise to me that she lost a bit earlier than expected because she needed the rest. Potapova's an interesting character because she loves to have a running commentary with her team on the side. I think Katie's got a reference to her quote in relation to her coach when the coach was trying to encourage her, Katie, and she referenced the scoreboard. What was that about?
You will have heard me before talk about tennis players who enjoy their game are better at playing. So Paolini, smiling, happy, relaxed, lovely, wins a game. Obviously not every time, but you can tell that the mentality of the way they play is almost equally, if not sometimes more important than the talent and what they're actually doing with their racket. So Potapova playing, and she's she's looking like she's going to lose. Her coaches are trying to saying to her, "Come on, you can do it, you can do it." And she walks up to her box and she just says, "Have you not seen the scoreboard?" I'm just like, this is just outrageous abuse of your player box. It's not. I think it's not a particularly nice people skills, but it's also not very smart. These guys are people she's paying to encourage her. These are her employees who she is hoping will get the best out of her. They ask for the best out of her, and she gives them abuse back. I think it was childish. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. There are a few of them, I'm afraid, and they cry and they squeal and they shout and they abuse their box, and I don't like it. I'm sorry. I'm really glad I don't work for the BBC because I'd have to sort of say nice things about them, like, yeah, well, she's got lovely hair, but I don't have to say that because Chalk Dust Media says it how it is. That's why you're here.
Yes, her result, she'll be grateful for over 300 ranking points. Potapova eventually losing to Kostyuk in the semi-finals. She had another good win over Pliskova, backing up her Raducanu win. So getting to the semi-finals for the world number 50 was a big result, but it was her social life off the court that was gaining attention because she's going out with a male tennis player, Greek sport, who was supporting Potapova at the sidelines, but also, as Katie's describing, taking the abuse from the player, which seems to be quite amusing, and we see the comedic value of that. But of course, the player and the coaching boxers at the time are deadly serious.
Don't even think I do see the comedian. I have to laugh because if I didn't laugh, I'd cry. It's embarrassing. As a feminist, I'm embarrassed because you know what? Maybe barring Andy Murray, because he did a bit of that, just abuse of the box. The men don't. They don't cry on the court. They don't shout at their player box. They know that those people are there for them, to support them. And so as a feminist, I'm a bit like, oh, for goodness sake, represent us better, please.
So, in respect of this aspect of some of the players' habits, then it kind of leads naturally on to Mira Andreeva, who has been probably the most highlighted case of someone who's struggled on court, shared more than just a few emotions, taking it out on her racket and also her coaching box. And that was again shown up in the round of 16 in Madrid, where Mira Andreeva obviously came through a match because she then went on to reach the final. But in her last 16 match against a lower ranked player, Anna Bondar, she looked like she was going to suffer a 3-set defeat, having been 5-1 up in the third set. And having lost 5 games in a row, she sat down at 5-6, feeling like this match was going to end in defeat. And she just started a running commentary from her seated position next to the umpire. So she was having
Which we could hear.
she had to shout this across to Conchita Martinez, her coach, and she just kept repeating, "I'm a loser. I'm a loser. I'm not a champion." And this was, again, a gift to all those people who like to expose players.
Well, and a gift to her opponent. As a mature woman, if you sit down there and your job is to win tennis matches and you're not winning, but you still have a chance to win, or you still have a chance for them in the next game to not lose, you would think that your brain would say, yes, I know that there are emotions, but you would think that your brain would say, how am I best to cope with this? What is my best plan of action in order to stay in the game for another few points, even if that's your minimum, just not to lose? You'd have thought. And I don't suppose if she asked her brain that question, her brain would say, you shout to your player box that you're a loser. And it's sad, really. I feel sad because I don't think someone does that unless they have been told that when they were younger by I don't know who, but it's not very nice. It's quite sad mentally. And I think it's not, if I was her, I don't know, people close to her when she was younger, I would be feeling a little bit like looking at myself right now and thinking, that rubbed off.
But fortunately, she did win the 12th game of that set to take it to a tiebreak, and won the tiebreak to come through that match and prove that she wasn't a loser. And her week got better, starting with her birthday, literally the next day. So that was kind of her last act as an 18-year-old, to have this rant to her box. But then, having turned 19, literally on April the 29th, she then proceeded to make the final, winning the next 2 matches as well.
Presumably, she doesn't ever apologize on social media or in the post-match interview. She doesn't ever say, sorry for my silly outburst there.
No, I think obviously the teams behind the scenes, obviously working on all these things, and it's at points of stress in the tennis match, which is, as Katie says, their one job, that some of their young, immature habits come out. And to be fair to Miranda Davis, she did present herself very differently in the final. She was very calm and composed
Yes,
throughout the match,
yes.
despite losing. There were a few tears after she lost, but when she got on the stage to do her runners-up speech, she was actually very well spoken.
Well, that's right, and it was a shame for her from her point of view because we did that live. We commentated on that match live, and there were people in the room on the chat that I always answered to the chat, and the chat they were kind of just sitting there waiting for her to break a racket. When's she gonna smash her racket? And then she lost the first set. It's like, oh, is she gonna start smashing her racket now? And that's totally understandable from us watching, thinking, "Oh, for goodness sake, this is ridiculous." But also quite sad for her to be, in 10 years' time, she's remembered for the 18-year-old who smashed a racket and said, "I am not a champion," which isn't, of course, the best tennis, the highlights of her Wikipedia career.
No, she's a very good player, just 19, and now she's been inside the top 10 for the past year, and she's consolidated her position. Having had a bit of a ropey end to 2025, performances this season have been very consistent. And despite the odd dramatic loss, she left the court in Stuttgart shouting and swearing at one of the spectators, and then followed up with this rant in an earlier round in Madrid. She's doing very well. She's very consistent. And I think actually, if she focused on her tennis, she can be very proud of her performances. She might be a little bit disappointed in yesterday's match. She was outplayed really from start to finish by Kostyuk. There was a slight dip in the start of the second set where you thought Andreeva might win the second set. She had a couple of set points, but Kostyuk has developed a big serve and was very impressive. She saved the odd break point on serve with big serve. She served a couple of aces at the right time. And really, you never felt like Andreeva got enough momentum to really swing the match back in her favour. And Kostyuk won the final 6-3, 7-5.
It
But
was an enjoyable final to watch though, wasn't it? Strong tennis from both players, but they both looked like they could have won, even though it was just a straight set. It wasn't a walkover, point by point. It was really good tennis.
yes, and we talk about clay court specialists. These two are really proving that this season. Andreeva had won 12 of her 13 matches on clay coming into the final, and Kostyuk had won every match she played on clay this season coming into the final. She just won in France in a smaller event in Rouen, 250 event, and then she's backed it up with a win in Madrid. So one of the few players to go back to back. Although she was a number one seed in France at a lesser event, she was expected to win that event. It built her confidence, doing what I've encouraged a lot of these high profile younger players who burst onto the scene, rather than just ply your trade at the highest level where you're going to come up against the best players and suffer probably more defeats. She took a lesser event, went with her ranking in the 20s, got number one seed position, and went on and won that event, built up her confidence and carried it on into this event, took advantage of the draw when Raducanu lost, beat players she should beat, got to the final, and then played a great match. And compared with last season, her record now against top 10 players is much more impressive. Last year, she played top 10 players 8 times, winning just one match. This season, she's again played top 10 players 8 times already, but this season she's won 5 of those 8 matches.
And she looks in her demeanor, the way she carries herself, she looks certainly much more mature than a lot of them. And she looks quite self-confident, but not in a cocky way. She just looks self-assured, confident. She looks like an impressive woman and she's also, I find her, she stands up for herself morally. She stands up for her country. She won't shake hands with the Russians. She's from Ukraine. And, there are people all over the Twitter sphere saying, "You're still going on about that?" And of course, she's saying yes, because that war is still going on. So I really like her. I like her ethics. I like the way she plays, and I like the way she represents herself and womankind.
Yes, an impressive young lady, 23 years of age. It's taken her 3 or 4 years. So anyone who's following Andreeva, Eala, players who are either side of 20 years of age, and Boko, even Coco Gauff is only 21. All these players, when they look at Marta Kostyuk, she was world number one junior but she's taken 4 or 5 seasons to really acclimatise and get used to the demands, mature into the player she's become now. And she was talking candidly about having therapy to manage her emotions on court and be much more controlled and focus on her tennis and not let those emotions spill out onto the court.
Surprised that that's a big thing. I fully expected that they'd all be having therapy, just because if you attend to your body, you attend to your tactics, you attend to your racket, your kit, your everything else, why would you not attend to your mind?
Interesting, because in the last 20 years, certainly since the turn of the century, sport has talked about help off court, not just with a coach, but with a sports psychologist. And they've been obviously prevalent across lots of sports for certainly 20 years or so. Whereas this was the first time I'd heard reference to therapy rather than a psychologist. And that's quite interesting. And it might pave the way for more players to seek a therapist rather than just a sports psychologist.
Although you wondered, is that just a terminology difference? Is that her saying this? Sounds to me like that's the same thing as counseling therapy, sports therapy, sports psychology. It's probably all very similar.
Very similar, but I think sports psychologists actually take a lead role, whereas my understanding is therapists help you to bring it out of yourself more. So
Yeah.
they help unpick things through their questioning, but they don't sit down and sort of deliver expertise.
They can't lead you.
Whereas sports psychologist very much has much more sort of training and expertise in terms of how they advise a player to.
So there is actually
I
advice in
think there would be a difference
yeah,
there, but we are sort of, there's definitely overlap.
yeah.
The final thing I want to talk about from Madrid, which will lead on to my Clinchers disease. I have to raise Hailey Baptiste, a player who has a big game. She's a young, powerful player from America who has always been capable of the odd, isolated victory. But this season, she's really gone deep in a couple of events, and Madrid was the second time she'd reached the semi-final, having also reached the semi-final earlier in the season. But she done it by beating Aryna Sabalenka, the first time Sabalenka had lost before the final in 2026. This was a quarterfinal match, and Baptiste really benefiting from having a huge serve. So she has a big serve. She's got one of the biggest serves in the game, and she used it to really good effect. And she played a really good match. Now, Aryna Sabalenka, despite Baptiste's great tennis, they shared the first 2 sets 6-2. Sabalenka winning the first set 6-2. Baptiste came back winning the second set 6-2. The third set, Sabalenka had the edge and had 6 match points, including several in the deciding set tiebreak. But she had a few before we got to the tiebreak. But Baptiste and Sabalenka went toe to toe, big shot after big shot, and it was a really interesting match, and one I felt when Baptiste had a chance to win the match. Sabalenka twice broke serve before we got to the tiebreak. Baptiste served for the match at 6-5, and Sabalenka made her play every ball. She basically refused to give any errors away, and she said, right, Baptiste, can you win this match? I'm not going to lose it. And in that game, that was a real insight in how the very best players play. And yet, when Sabalenka had her 6 match points, she just struggled to win any of them. And eventually, Baptiste came through that tiebreak, winning it 9-7 to take her place in the semi-final. But as we know, Mira Andreeva was just too steady and solid and beat Baptiste, despite Baptiste having set points in the second set. A really great run from Hailey Baptiste, who's now ranked 25 in the world, so she's earned a seeded spot at the bigger events that are to follow.
And what did Marta end up as in terms of her ranking after yesterday?
Yes, so she has reached a new career high ranking of 15 in the world. She has been as high as 16 before, but this is a new career high ranking. And she's always been just inside the top 30 the last 2 or 3 seasons. She's always been sort of seeded, but now she'll be inside the top 16, which means she won't meet a top 8 player until the round of 16.
Okay. So now we're moving on to the Clinchers disease, which is a little phrase which Dan has coined, and I'm not convinced it was the best phrase he's ever coined. So write in the comments, let's choose something a little bit prettier. And otherwise, it's going to stay the Clinchers disease. So let's talk about it.
Okay, so what makes individual sports so fascinating for me is you're totally reliant on just yourself when it comes to those moments, which makes the difference between winning and losing. Except, are you? Are you totally reliant on yourself, or are you more reliant on the opponent? How many individual sports have been won by players who really have just picked up the pieces from their opponent's failure to complete the victory through their own nerves, the pressure of the moment? So, Katie, when you get to those moments of winning your individual croquet matches,
Yes.
are
Oh,
you
yes.
thinking about the pressure of the moment, or are you oblivious to it?
I am oblivious to it. I have the Ted Lasso school of competition, and that is whatever you're playing, play it like you're a goldfish. Play it like you can't remember the last point that happened, and you can't really think beyond this one. So I play like a goldfish. Every point is a new dawn.
Yeah, tennis is very much sort of focused on the big point. The big points are kind of waiting. So you'll see a player at love all, 15 love, 15 all, 15-30, and they're playing like they always play, executing shots, going for their winners. And then suddenly we get to a moment in the match where it's 30-40, juice, advantage, and the score is 5-4, 5 all, 5 in games, and we get to those moments which are going to determine the set or even the match outcome. And suddenly a player becomes much more defensive. They go for shots much more within the lines. They play safe. And you begin to wonder whether are they hoping that their opponent is going to make a mistake and they're just waiting for that mistake? And have they really just almost over the course of the previous 30 seconds changed their whole strategy rather than doing what they've done to get them to that point? And I'm a great believer in playing each point the same and committing and trying to execute the shots that have got you to that point. And if we just consider even the last of how many times players get to set point or match point and then struggle, it's quite remarkable. So Mira Andreeva played Leila Fernandez in the quarterfinals. Fernandez had 3 set points to win the first set, failed to convert them. Andreeva won that set 7-6 and went on to win the match. Against Hailey Baptiste, Hailey Baptiste in the second set had a set point in the second set tiebreak at 6-5. She has one of the biggest serves, as I've already said in this episode. She stood up to serve to win the second set. And what did she do on her first serve? She kicked in a second serve style serve rather than go for the big serve. She played safe. Andreeva capitalized on that second serve speed of serve and hit a blistering return to take the score to 6-all in the tiebreak. Baptiste now had to win 2 more points. What did she do at 6-all on her serve? She whacked down the first serve, won the point with a really big first serve. Now, you can't guarantee that you're going to hit your perfect first serve, but here was a player that at 6 up opted for safety. And then when the score went back to 6-all and it wasn't set point because you have to win 2 points clear, she then played her natural game. Andreeva won that tiebreak 9-7 and won the match. Baptiste missed the opportunity. For me, I see it all the time. The difference between the winners, the regular winners on tour, and the people who don't win very often, certainly at the highest level, is they don't commit at the moment of potential moment of victory. And we see it in croquet as well, where players will opt not to run the hoop, they'll instead defend the hoop and knock their opponent's ball away.
Playing a defensive game. Yes. It's the pressure. It's again psychological, isn't it?
It is. The Clinchers disease is really where you change your natural way of playing in the most intense pressure moments. And my belief is that what makes the greatest players, the players that win, is that they're able to commit and execute shots at those important moments, just as if it's the start of the match or the middle of the match. And another aspect, which I think was where Aryna Sabalenka just struggled with this week in Madrid, is that her worst tennis was not very close to her best tennis. So you don't have to play brilliantly in the pressure moments, but you have to play consistently solid. And the best players are able to do that. They're able to keep their worst tennis being average at worst. They don't suffer from really poor shots in those moments, and they're able to make good decisions and clarity of thought and cope in those moments. And I think this is something that Marta Kostyuk this week has proven, that she's able uh, to win and not suffer from the Clinchers disease.
So I just asked AI about it's come up with a better phrase than the Clinchers disease. And to be fair to Coach Dan, it's come up with a load of terrible, probably worse than yours. So we're going to sit here and keep it as the Clinchers disease. I think just the word clincher. Anyway, it's an interesting concept anyway, regardless of what we call it.
Yeah, so as we come up, we've got some big events coming up in the season. Beyond Rome this week, we then have the second Grand Slam of the season, the French Open, and then the grass court season for all the UK fans. We'll all be sitting up looking forward to the Wimbledon and the summer season of grass court tennis. Look out for those players that you see wobbling in those important moments, and you'll think back and think, that's when
Clinchers disease.
Dan talking about the Clinchers disease. But yes, we can look forward to those players, maybe talking with therapists, maybe even getting in touch with us at Chalk Dust Media and even having a word with us.
Yes, Tita Katie, as our Filipino fandom call me, which is very, very sweet. To Rome, a lot of the players have been in Rome for a few days now, haven't they? Because like any other mortals, humans, we like to go where it's nice to be. And not that Madrid isn't nice, a place is nice to be. But I think there were quite a few people complaining about the food in Madrid, and there was a bit of Novo virus going on. I'm not sure that the two were linked. I'm sure we couldn't possibly say, but they weren't particularly happy. Rome, of course, is a beautiful, welcoming place for a lot of people who are not Europeans and who may not have been there before, or may have been there before for 3 to 5 days, like they go wherever they go, and might not have caught up with a lot of the culture and atmosphere and the fun you can have there. So they've been there relaxing, practicing, taking it all in, and are probably going to be quite well rested by the time they start playing, because I think it's not until the midweek that the tournament actually begins. Is that right?
That's right. Officially, the tournament starts on the 5th of May, which is Tuesday, but they'll start with qualifying. So the top players won't play till next weekend, virtually next weekend, Friday, Saturday. But the big news for real tennis aficionados
Which, of course, you all are.
Is that Emma Raducanu is back. She is in Rome, she's practicing, and even bigger news is, after all the changes of coaches, Emma Raducanu, the word on the street, has finally recognized what everyone said back in September 2021, which is, why change a successful partnership when you've just won the US Open? If it ain't broke,
don't fix it.
She has gone back to Andrew Richardson, the coach who was sat there at her biggest win all those years ago now.
Okay, so I'm Andrew Richardson now. And I'm thinking, what took you so long? And I'm also thinking, that was quite rude. Or maybe I shouldn't take it personally because I'm a tennis coach now and I'm Andrew Richardson. I'm not me. But I can't imagine it working. It's sort of like, well, I've been around the whole world 3 times and I've picked everyone except you. But nobody seems to be quite as bad as you. So I'll have you back. Is the message I'm getting if she hires me again.
Well, it's been over 4 years. I think he's probably feeling like I was right.
Yes.
And therefore he feels he's probably starting after that time period from a good position. He's wasn't able to commit to the full tour schedule, and that was a sort of publicized reasoning for it at the time. It wasn't that he was an awful coach. It's a
But
bit hard.
later we realised that that probably, very probably, wasn't the real reason, Daniel.
Well, I don't know what the real reason was, but I actually know Andrew Richardson as a 12-year-old boy because he played for Lincolnshire. He's a left-hander, and I played a few times with Andrew Richardson, and he reached the fourth round at Wimbledon. Now, I might have got that mixed up. He definitely played at Wimbledon. But Andrew Richardson has been in tennis a long time, and he obviously did wonders for Emma Raducanu because he was the coach that helped her win the US Open. And it's going to be very interesting in Rome whether he has a positive impact. Emma Raducanu has not been playing much tennis. She's last was seen in Romania, which is obviously her father's home country, and she got to the final, and that was as long ago as late February. So where are we now? Early May. So it's been a good 2 months since Raducanu's been on court.
And I remember the chat at the time, 4 years ago, when she did win the US Open. The chat at the time was that actually the person, I don't remember the name on everyone's lips as to who helped Raducanu win that was Tim Henman. Tim Henman was by the side of the court, giving her like support, helping her through. I'm sure Andrew Richardson was there as well, and I'm sure he did all the donkey work behind the scenes. But the word on the street was that it was Tim Henman's support that sort of took her through. How much do you think that was true or not true, Dan?
Yes, it was a funny event in that Raducanu was put on the show courts pretty much the second half of that event every round, which was quite unusual because she wasn't a top player. She had to qualify. She wasn't a seeded player, but there was that many seeds being knocked out that her pathway to glory didn't require her to beat a big name. Henman was working for the media, and he was sat literally in the first row at the side of the court. And those last 3 or 4 matches, all on the show court, very much he was closer to Raducanu in terms of drawing the match than Richardson, because Flushing Meadow is a big stadium court, and the coach's box wasn't as close as Tim Henman. But I think you're probably doing Andrew Richardson a disservice. I think Tim Henman was an added bonus for Raducanu and did make a difference, especially in the final and certainly the semi-final and final, where a young player their mind might get distracted and wander, etc. He helped her focus in those important moments.
I didn't mean to put Richardson's hard work down. I just wanted to know whether what the media said and what the chat was, it must have been quite annoying for him then at the time. You know, he puts all the hard work in for all those years or for all those weeks or months or however long he'd been her coach. And then everyone says, good Lord, Tim Henman did help her to win.
But it'd be interesting to see how she performs. She got to the last 16 last year in Rome, so she has to win a couple of matches this week. She will be seeded. Her ranking is still inside the top 30. I think she's about 28 in the world. So despite not playing, she's also not been losing. She's meant to have had quite a bad virus, so something unknown depleting her energy levels, etc. So hopefully she's over that. She will go in against a lower ranked player in round 2. She's got to win 2 matches to defend the points she won last year. But she seemed positive. She's been chatting with other players who, as Katie said, have been there for a week practicing. A lot of players who lost in Madrid early will have gone over to Rome. More and more players are taking literally the kitchen sink in terms of their home life. We see more than 1 dog now. Some players have even got 2 dogs courtside. Everywhere they go. Eva Lees, the German player who's got a top 10 following on social media, even though she's ranked outside the top 70 after injury. She even takes her young sister, who's a teenager, sort of 12, 13-year-old sister, who's now becoming quite a focus point.
Does she play tennis too?
She plays tennis, and the posts on social media are, we've got a new hitting partner for you, Emma. So Raducanu was having a joke in terms of having a knock with her baby sister. It's not just a player, a coach, and a fitness trainer. Players now are literally taking their pets and their family members as well.
Whilst we might go to Rome for a weekend break or a week's holiday and watch tennis, this isn't a holiday for them. This is constant. This is their year. 48, 46 weeks a year. They are doing this. Whilst we think, oh, it's this wonderful and glamorous and fun, it must be exhausting. And this is their home. So it's kind of nice that they can take something resembling a home with them.
Yeah, so what can we expect in Rome? It's a much slower clay surface. So Madrid, notoriously the quickest of the clay surfaces where big servers, players come to the fore. Rome generally tended to favour the more traditional clay court player. Hence, the defending champion is the diminutive smiley Jasmine Paolini. Katie Loves, who's very smiley, but her smiles have not been so commonplace because she's not been winning and her ranking is suffering as a result. So at the start of this tournament, when all those 1,000 points come off her ranking, she's going to no longer be in the top 10. Her ranking will drop into the late teens. And unless she has a very good defense of her title, she will drop down the rankings and find it difficult to get back into the top 10, as the game is very different to 2 or 3 years ago. So although Jasmine Paolini's had a very good career, I think we might be seeing her best years behind her. So the smile might not be so prevalent, I'm afraid.
She's a happy person, not because she's winning. She's got more about her than that.
Yes.
And so just in terms of the surfaces, obviously Rome clay court. And we've got then the French Open, which is also clay court.
Yes. Once we've had the first weekend in June, then the French Open final will be finishing and we'll be on to the grass. In terms of
the grass, I can smell it now.
Rome, though, the fans make a big difference. So if we think the crowds in certain locations have been biased, wait until you're on the stadium court in Rome, especially if you are playing Jasmine Paolini, because last year
Oh, yes.
there was quite a lot of press coverage about not quite the 12th man, but the effect of the crowd on every opponent Paolini played, and it was felt that it went too far.
But it was also interesting because it's Italy, and last year it was Paolini, but on the men's side it was Sinner. So you've got two of the favourites up there. So that's really, I think, probably why they were playing even more into the crowd. And the Italians are famous for being passionate, aren't they? So I don't see why they shouldn't be supporting their fellow countrymen. It's good.
But it'd be interesting to see. Irina Sabalenka's not done well in Rome traditionally. The past few years, she got to the quarterfinals last year, but in previous years, she's always been in the final in Madrid. And so tactically, for me, she didn't want to have another long week before the French Open. The French Open is where Sabalenka really wants to win. These other events are not important to her now at this stage in her career. So she's fully focused on being ready for the French Open. It'd be interesting whether she exits early, having exited at the quarterfinal stage last week. Last year, Qin Wenjiang was much healthier. She's suffered from injuries since. That wasn't a terrible loss, but it'd be interesting to see how deep Sabalenka goes. I don't expect Elena Rybakina to go too deep either. This is going to be a slower surface. Her serve will not be as potent and dominant on this surface. So it's going to be interesting. Last year, we had some interesting players get to the latter stages, not just Jasmine Paolini. Coco Gauff got to the final, but we had Peyton Stearns getting to the semi-final, as well as Qin Wenjiang. So you can expect one or two unusual players, possibly certainly in the last 8, if not the last 4. I'm not sure. I think Sabalenka will probably want to do better this week, even though I've just said she might tactically be.
Come on, you can't be on both sides. You
So
get splinters in your bottom sitting on that fence.
if Sabalenka and Goff are not involved in the latter stages, then I think we're going to have a new winner. But outside of those two, I'm not sure, because I think Kostyuk and Andreeva will not go deep this week. They
They'll
put
be
a lot
tired.
of effort in Madrid.
And they'll be saving themselves for French.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think we're going to have a new winner.
Is that where you're sitting?
That's where I'm sitting.
Okay, new winner. New winner. Very good. Exciting. Well, thanks very much for coming along. We've got a couple of other things, and then we'll let you go, because this has been quite a long episode.
And we've been talking for hours, Katie.
Well, I know I have to do the editing, so I'm thinking this is going to be a long afternoon for me.
Well, we'll just finish with the rankings reset and ranking surge.
Yes.
So very simply, we're going to focus on those players we've already talked about. The world number one position, going back a couple of months, Sabalenka had nearly a 3,000 point lead, but things can change very quickly. So in Madrid, having been the reigning champion, she was defending 1,000 points. By losing in the quarterfinal, she lost the difference between 215 points and 1,000. That was her difference between last year and this year. So she was minus 785 points. That was the biggest ranking drop of any player on tour last week. That just shows you how quickly things can change. Lena Rybakina, on the other hand, hadn't got any points to defend. She'd lost in Madrid in the third round last year. So by reaching the fourth round, even though she lost to Potapova, she actually gained 55 points. A swing of 840 points, 55 points on from 785, 840. Yeah, so a swing of over 800 points. So Sabalenka's lead is now just down to it's around 1,600 points. She's got 10,100 points and Rybakina's on 8,600 and some points. So there's literally down to 1,500, 1,600 points. And the gap was nearly twice that only a few months ago. So she is actually, for the first time, under pressure, because if she does not go deep in the French Open and Wimbledon, we could have a new world number one by the time we get to the US Open.
So that's the surge and the drop.
That's the drop. The surge has to be Marta Kostyuk, who's got to be our player of the week, who, as we've already said, has risen to a new career high of number 15 in the world. And she did the mirror opposite of Sabalenka, having reached the quarterfinal last year. She went on to win, so she gained 785 points on the plus side.
Fantastic. Well done, her.
So that's it for this week.
That's it for this week. Thanks very much for coming along.
We'll
We'll
do
be
a
doing a live draw on Monday morning,
quick update on the draw,
9:30.
and then some live watch-alongs with our Philippine fans.
And if anyone has any particular fan base that they would like us to do a watch along for, we will. We do concentrate on Eala and her siblings in Southeast Asia, mainly because we have thousands of people who come to watch. But equally, we do enjoy doing the ones like we did yesterday with a nice little cozy. There was about 500 people. And little cozy room full for the final of the Madrid Open. And so just pop it on if there's a particular match you'd like us to talk you through and commentate on.
And good luck with all your individual pursuits this week. And if you're playing anyone competitively, don't suffer from the Clinchers Disease. Dan's tip for you is to focus on the process. So to Simeon and all those other tennis players out there, remember the old bounce hit, where you just literally focus on the process by telling yourself every time the ball bounces, you just say bounce in your head. And then as the racket contacts the ball, you're saying hit. What that does is it concentrates the mind on the process, and you don't get consumed by the moment and the nerves that go with it.
Alternatively, you could do this, and that's you playing like a goldfish. You forget what happened last minute because it doesn't matter.
All the best advice with Chalk Dust Media. And bye from me.
Bye. Salamat po.